Hey everyone, welcome back to the ARC Party. It's been a little bit since I've done an author interview, so I'm really excited to get back in with this one. This is a returning guest. This episode I have Joshua Millican joining me again. He was on the podcast last time promoting his shortwave killer VHS book called Teleportasm, and he joins me in this episode to talk about Dopefoot, his upcoming novel that involves a college dropout that goes into the Northern California wilderness to work on a marijuana farm, and there might be some cryptid activity. Enjoy the conversation.
Dopefoot is a gory cryptid mystery. A college dropout seeking an off-the-grid fantasy finds himself in an outlaw wilderness working on a cannabis farm with cultish cohorts. His arrival coincides with an all-out war between overstimulated gangs and well-funded mobsters. And beneath it all, lurking in the most dismal corners of the forest, even darker forces are awakening, agitated, angry. The entire forest is a tinderbox on the verge of ignition.
When I read the pitch of Dopefoot, like several things connected with me immediately. I think it's one of these kind of concepts that people were going to latch on to parts of it um, real easily. And so, like, the Bigfoot element of it, obviously, is something that is everybody likes to talk about that. The thing that really connected with me is the kind of culture of marijuana farms in Northern California. And the reason is, I don't know if you've heard of, there's a author, his name's Matthew McBride. He did for a long time, he was writing crime.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the crime scene in the early 2010s and stuff. Great writer. And when I was interviewing him about one of his other books, he was telling me he was working on a manuscript about that exact topic. And he kind of explained how things just kind of work differently. There's it's almost like the laws of the country don't reach there in a way. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
it's like its own little kind of microcosm. And I'm sure that as the legality of marijuana's changed over the years, that maybe that's changed. But the thing that was really fascinating to me was, like, I want to read about this culture of this very specific region of California where marijuana farming was like almost like, because you hear about in like Eastern Kentucky and everything, and there's like the farms with the booby traps and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This felt different. This felt more almost militarized, is the way that
Hmm.
it felt to me when he was describing it. And so when I found out that that was going to be kind of the setting for this book, I was like, oh, I'm so in, because I get almost like a window into this kind of maybe underrepresented or underexplored culture that exists in our country. So, as much as Bigfoot is the big flashy thing that people think about, for me it was, I want to learn. I want to learn about what this could be like. And so, the first question is, um, how? What's your experience with? How did you gain knowledge about this kind of thing in the world?
Sure. A lot of it is research. Have you heard of the documentary series Murder Mountain?
Yes, I think I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that came out maybe a decade ago, but I think at this point it's really entered the zeitgeist. That is kind of the area. It's the same area that my story takes place, and it, it it shows the lifestyle of cannabis cultivation, and of course it traces the history of it from first the hippies moved to Northern California after the Vietnam War, and cannabis was just one of many crops that they cultivated. It turned out that the climate and the soil and the and everything just lined up to make really high quality cannabis. So by the 80s, it was huge, big business. These original settlers, the hippies, were making decent money. with cannabis. Then there was the war on drugs. Everything got kind of sketchy. And now, in the 21st century, there's been a shift from outlaw to legality. And that has come with its own set of new challenges. So basically, I think what people know in the back of their minds, something that maybe has already come through because of things like Murder Mountain, the old hippie ma and pop pot farms are sort of like becoming a thing of the past, sort of the idealized version of the marijuana industry in the wilderness of Northern California. It's gone to a point where you can kind of pay your way in either as a business, as a corporation, or you just happen to have a lot of money. Um, and in an industry like cannabis, you can have gang money, you can have mob money. So that's the bulk of where my knowledge came from. Now I want to be clear, or I guess just add this. I know people in the region of Murder Mountain in Northern California, Emerald Triangle, and they don't like the documentary. They think it embellishes for dramatic effect, and I'm sure it does. And there are still plenty of ma and pop cannabis farms out there. The original baby boomers, and there's a new generation that's still trying to keep the ideals alive and everything. But there are these new elements swirling around in Northern California as it relates to the cannabis culture. Now, there's one other documentary series on Hulu called Sasquatch. Investigative journalist named David Holthouse looked into rumors of a Bigfoot attack on a marijuana farm. So that's in it too. Actually, I kind of reference Murder Mountain and the Sasquatch documentary in Dopefoot in chapter one. There's a character who kind of serves as like I don't know, a bit of a Virgil-esque taking our main character across the river Styx. Kind of gives him the lowdown, and in those monologues, this character Jester, you kind of get the gist of both Murder Mountain and David Holthouse's documentary. And I'm trying to do it in a way that's apparent that these are what I'm drawing from. I'm not
Mhm.
claiming that I'm the guy who knows all this stuff, or that my knowledge is more extensive than what these things have shown. Now, I really have issue with the Sasquatch documentary for a few reasons. I don't even know how deep we want to get into this, but ultimately, he was very dismissive of Bigfoot belief. And it was kind of an abrupt ending for him to basically say, of course, it wasn't Bigfoot. And he has a theory about what really happened, these murders on a pot farm, but it's unproven. And I just felt he was really dismissive of Bigfoot belief and cryptid culture, especially when he named his documentary Sasquatch. It wasn't called Did Sasquatch Kill People on a Pot Farm? It wasn't called The Sasquatch Murders or something where people could maybe infer that it might be a little more salacious. It was just called Sasquatch. So anyone with an interest in Sasquatch would see this and be like, oh, great, only to kind of be slapped in the face at the end by this guy saying, of course it wasn't Bigfoot. I don't know what it is. It was probably this. But of course it wasn't Bigfoot. I don't believe in Bigfoot, but I would be stoked if he was real. And I'm not one of these people who revels in kind of like knocking down other people's beliefs. So I'm kind of giving you a long answer. You said,
Yeah.
where does my knowledge come from? I do live in Northern California. I have history in Northern California. I know a guy who has worked on some of these gorilla farms, and he's told me stories, about, things that just kind of confirm other things that I've heard in these other documentaries and whatnot. Nothing outstanding, but that's the basis of my knowledge. Just kind of, well, also I kind of came of age in the Bay Area as much as I did in Southern California, and I've seen cannabis culture go from completely illegal to the medical marijuana movement to legalization. So, in a lot of ways, thinking back to, what it was like when I was in my early 20s, I can't believe that we're living in this golden age of marijuana. But like Dopefoot explores anything, with this kind of complex history, just kind of like automatically breeds a black market. And,
Mhm.
it's as clean as you try to make it. There's always going to be an underbelly.
Um, yeah, and like I, I've always kind of been at a remove from, I guess, marijuana or cannabis in general. But my kind of impression was um, corporations or the business side of America. I just heard something, and I'm definitely in my apartment by myself, so that's creepy. They're listening.
Hmm.
Has kind of always been like, we're going to squash this until we can profit from it, and that's kind of
Mm.
always been my impression. But it seems like anything that's a commodity will experience that on the legitimate business side and the criminal side.
Hmm.
And one thing I think that the feeling I get from this culture or situation is, yeah, it's there's all the different interested parties, and how can I um, benefit from that? And to that end, you portray a variety of people um, who have farms in this area, which you refer to as the Green Cauldron. I don't know if that's an
Yeah.
actual thing or like a thing that you created.
Yeah, I made it up. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone knows, not everyone. If you're interested in cannabis culture, you know about the Green Triangle,
Yeah.
which is Humboldt, Trinity, and another, Mendocino, and they form
Hmm.
like a triangle shape. And I just wanted to give a sense of geography to it. I wanted it to seem real. And it's also kind of a nod to the Green Inferno, which is what they called the jungle and Cannibal Holocaust. And then Eli
Uh,
Roth made a movie called The Green Inferno, another kind of cannibal thing. Basically, just like a real dangerous, bubbling. For Inferno, it's like fire. In my Green Cauldron, it's like a green bubbling over.
mhm.
Smoke, danger.
Well, yeah, and that's, I think, portrayed that. So there's the there's the the actual like industry of things and the hardness or the danger that's involved in it. But then like the main character in this story walks into a situation seemingly very, like, he's even dubbed harmless
Hmm.
because I don't know if you can, if you're not familiar with it, go into a situation like that in a way where you're really prepared for what is
Hmm.
coming. And
Hmm.
so yeah, like that bubbling menace or whatever is kind of what this main character is, very innocently, like, it's just this young guy who kind of is aimless, doesn't know exactly what he wants to do,
Hmm.
and so he's like, oh, I heard about this thing, I can make some money, but like he has no idea what's
Oh,
coming. And so
he's brutally naive. I mean,
yeah,
you want to just slap this kid.
yep, yeah. And so I like that contrast of like this, you don't know what you're in for.
Hmm.
And even in, like you said, that he gets picked up at a location and brought to the farm, and that
Hmm.
conversation on the way there almost feels like, even the way that you describe the truck is going in, like, is riding in like the ruts of the,
Hmm.
like, even the truck can't um do anything other than what is done. Like, it's like that almost represents like, this is the track, this is the way things go, there's nothing that you can do about it,
Mm-mm.
this is just how it is.
Yeah,
As
you're on
he's
the
learning about,
ride. You're on
yep,
the
you
ride.
can't get off the ride. So
Hmm.
that was a great, like, the setup. So we haven't even talked about the story yet, but like the first setup was kind of a prologue where it's the Bigfoot stuff, and I don't want to talk about the Bigfoot stuff yet. But then the setup, his showing up in this region is he's picked up at like a kind of a neutral location and brought to the farm. And yeah, it's like, as he's learning about his kind of future, his near future, he's also kind of experiencing like the danger of it on the way, and like the, and how it's just like, this is how it is, like there's no changing it, you don't have a choice, this is what's going to happen. I
Hmm.
thought that was a great way to get into a story where like um yeah, like you're, it's out of your control, like how do
Hmm.
you survive in a situation that is bigger, scarier, more real than maybe you expected it to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that takeaway.
And it's one of those things where I felt it, but I didn't really think about it till I tried to express it. But like, it seemed very intentional that you were talking about like the ruts in the road and stuff.
Mm.
But yeah, that was very good. And that's I'm gonna point out one of the things I really like about what the stuff I've read of yours is that you can take situations that seem, trying to think of a way to say this doesn't sound insulting, but like possibly unserious
Hmm.
and like going to a like if the two components are Bigfoot and a marijuana farm,
Hmm.
this doesn't feel like the setting of like high literature,
Right.
but but the way that you handle the storytelling legitimizes everything.
Mm.
Like, and this is just me complimenting your writing. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to feel about this going in a little bit. I know that I trust your writing, so I know it's going to be good. But the way that you lay it down, it's like this could be, you know, taught in schools. Like this is to be taken seriously, even if it approaches it through like a setup of things that could be perceived as not serious.
Well, I tell you, my trick is I'm a very economical third person narrator. You know, I don't give you a lot of backstory. I don't fill you in on a lot. I let my characters tell the story because that's what happens in real life. You know, when you meet someone and you learn about them, it's through conversations and things like that. Um, so my characters always play it straight, no matter how like wacky things get. Like where objectively, this cannot be taken seriously, but the characters are all taking it seriously. So you know, the trick is to get people invested in the characters enough that they can see them as real, you know, people who exist. And then if they believe and if they're showing you know, these intense emotions, then you know the reader is along for the ride.
Yeah, that said it perfectly. That's absolutely true. And there are, to talk about that economic and letting the characters kind of tell you who they are. And there's a specific scene where they have the people. So we're just going to jump around in this
Yeah,
conversation,
let's jump
but there's a
around. I love
specific
it.
scene where someone infiltrates the farm that Harmless is working on. He's what's called a boiler,
Hmm.
I believe. And so he's captured and he's like in a shed tied to a chair and everything. And this is early on in the book. I think it's pretty early in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Act one.
And in that, just in the interaction between Harmless and this captive that he's supposed to just keep an eye on,
Hmm.
like you reveal so much about like that character, what he's willing to do, what is kind of too far,
Hmm.
but it also kind of like explores what these boilers are and their history. So you reveal a lot just in this like real kind of tiny scene of this guy who just started on a farm and it sounds pretty nice. And so far he's settling in, and all of a sudden they have a hostage or
Hmm.
a captive
Hmm.
that they need to, and like, you know, what do you do? Like they kill them and stuff. Maybe as he's thinking these things, like, I don't know, do they
Hmm.
kill them or that scene, just those interactions back and forth and the kind of outcome of that scene really tells you so much about Harmless as a character. It tells you
Hmm.
about kind of even the history of the region and these boilers people
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how they play into the farms, and introduces the idea of like outside interests that are like messing with the maybe economy or flow of how this is supposed to work. And very revelatory scene that is just basic. Like I think it even starts out, you don't want to talk, but
Right.
eventually like the talking starts, and it reveals so much just from that interaction. And that's so much better than if they're sitting around a fire and one of the people from the farm says, "This is the history of the Green
Right.
Cauldron." Like it's not expository. It's revealing through action, and it just connects you so easily to the story. Like it makes the flow feel so effortless. And so
Okay.
I have to give you a compliment about that. Yeah.
Appreciate that. And in that scene too, Harmless is potentially getting a view at what his life could turn out to be. He's kind of like seeing it from another perspective. This guy's, maybe a decade or two older than him, and he's, telling him, man, if I had known when I was your age what I know now, and this could be your only chance, and Harmless knows
Yep.
that he's being played. He's just really in over his head immediately. He has no power in this situation. He doesn't even know where he is. So, he
Yeah.
has very little to offer this hostage. And, he just looks at the situation and very easily slides into this nebulous gray area of outlaw justice. And, it seems like he's very, it didn't take much for him to cross a line into, the off grid, something like a mix between like a survivalist mentality and a cult.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And like it even makes you think, what would I, where would I land in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my mind, I'm like, I would realize I'm out of my depth, and my goal is what's going to help me personally get through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably going to care less about this random person who's
Right.
trying to get me to help them. And then maybe at the same time, care less about this farm that put me in this situation. And so like now I feel isolated. I feel alone in this crazy situation and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the decision he makes resonates later on. There are echoes later on. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so excellent setting. So the stakes are really kind of high and weird and crazy just in the actual kind of real world terrestrial setting that we have going on. On top of it, Harmless arrives in the situation at a time where there's just kind of more conflict maybe than historically. So there's it seems like there's kind of a tense equilibrium in general in the area, but Harmless arrives when things are kind of like heating up between these boilers and the Lithuanians. I had to write down Lithuanians because I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong,
Right.
nationality or whatever. So these Lithuanians who are really kind of going hard at the like they're extreme, I guess is the way that I'll say it.
Well, they paid their way in, so as far as they're concerned, they're the kings of the land that they own. This is outlaw territory. They got the papers. They're doing everything by the book. So, they think they're in the right, and whatever they need to do to protect their property and their business is fair game.
Yep. As opposed to the boilers who are like they have generational
Hmm.
kind of claim to the territory that's
Yeah,
been
they grew up
disrupted by
in
these outside. Yep.
Exactly. They grew up in these woods, working on these farms, and now these outsiders come in. They buy their way into the wilderness. They push out all of a lot of the mom and pops, the original growers, and the this land that was once available to them, the product of this land that was once available to them has all been cordoned off. They're pissed off. They think that yeah, this is their birthright that's been grabbed away from them.
That makes me think this is kind of like a weird analogy, but so for about 10 years, I worked for Apple. And one summer, I was working in the corporate headquarters for their business conduct department and like building compliance trainings and stuff, real boring things. But Apple has all these shuttle buses. You can go between like their different offices in the, Silicon Valley. And I was on one of those buses and I was talking to the driver and just, hey, I don't live around here. I'm from Chicago, blah, blah, blah. Talking back and forth. And this driver is like, yeah, my family's lived here for generations. And we had property in San Jose and like wherever it was. And they're like, we had to sell the property and move farther out because we couldn't afford, we got basically priced out of living in the land that we've owned for generations.
Hmm.
And so they were really pissed at tech basically for pushing them out, but at the same time working for tech because they have to. And it was this really tragic situation of feeling like dislocated or relocated, like basically pushed out, but also kind of under the thumb of, because if you don't work for tech, you kind of don't work in that area. And so that's what that makes me think of. It's like I would be pissed too, like especially like if the only work I could do is for the people who pushed me out. So yeah, like that's what
Well,
makes me think of like,
yeah, and then applying it to the Dopefoot scenario, you've got how the Boilers feel against the Lithuanians, but it echoes very far. There's a deep history. How do you think the indigenous felt when
yeah,
this area was first colonialized and they were subjugated, by the people who were pushing them out? There's a lot of dark history associated with the Pacific Northwest where my story takes place. As part of my research, I look at this, I look at other uh, books, works of fiction that take place in the area. And the cannabis industry and what's happening now is just kind of like the latest wave of greed driven exploitation of the wilderness. You have the loggers
yep.
starting very early on, and then you have the gold rush where you're literally tearing down mountains and damming up rivers and things like that. And you have the indigenous cultures that go back 10,000 years. Even before colonialization, it was a very violent place to live. Human history is synonymous with violence. And if there were civilizations, then that means there was violence. So there's a lot of bloodshed up there in the Pacific Northwest. Excuse me, yeah, Pacific Northwest. And yeah, the cannabis thing is kind of the latest heartbeat of that. The common denominator being each and every time it's kind of like nature beats them back. Yeah, the logging industry decimated a lot of area, but nature's playing a long game, and she's going to win. Same thing with the gold rush, same thing with the cannabis industry. When it's all gone, the forest will still be there, it'll still be part of this ancient ecosystem, and we'll all just be dust in the wind.
That's I know that sounds bleak, but that's like for me that's like that's justice. Like we,
Well, I was just on a panel at Bizarro Con last week for eco horror, and someone was talking about how eco horror kind of persuades us to live in harmony with nature instead of exploiting nature. And I said, no, no, no. Eco horror is darker than that. Eco horror doesn't care if you want to live in harmony with it. Nature will kill you on a good day because she is completely indifferent. And we want to talk about living in harmony. Well, that doesn't mean everything's equal right now. Like, we fucked nature so much that just living in harmony now doesn't make up for everything we've done. So that's why you got a lot of personification of the forest, where it's like it's angry, it's taking its toll. But that can be seen very literally in things like global warming and wildfires because of deforestation and things like that. So it's all very complex. So for me, eco horror says nature doesn't even care about living in harmony with you anymore. Harmony is just what you say to feel good about yourselves. I'm gonna win. You can try, but it's pointless. And I'm sorry
yeah.
to be bleak. I'm sorry to be bleak, but I'm a horror author, and that's what eco horror is. It's like it's facing the deepest, darkest, scariest aspects of these topics.
And the thing that I thought of when you were saying that is like a great illustration of how like indifferent nature is to our cooperation is I saw, like, I'm sure you see it all over the place, but like someone has a map of the United States and like places that people have gone missing,
Mhm.
and then a similar map of like known caves in the United States, and it's
Mhm,
almost
mhm.
identical. And it's like you can just, if you go into a cave or are near a cave, your likelihood of surviving is so low just because it's a dangerous thing. And it's not even
Sure.
like an active threat. It's just
Mm-mm.
like you fucked around and found out. So that kind of thing to me is just like the scale of our insignificance versus nature
Yeah.
is illustrated in the fact that like people die just because they're by a cave or whatever. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and logging was a very dangerous industry. loggers died every day. It was a very, very dangerous job. I don't think you really understand the immensity of it until you're there. Because there's really nothing like it. Redwood trees, the giant redwood trees, they only grow on one place in the entire planet, and that's the Pacific Northwest. That's from Northern California up to into Canada. And these trees are huge. They're not everywhere. They're a coastal tree, but all these other communities, the Green Cauldron doesn't have any of these giant redwoods, but it's still part of the atmosphere, the immensity of it all. If you could get like this big bird's eye aerial view of it, it would just be overwhelming. I don't think people realize that, basically between Sacramento and Portland, there is almost nothing
Yeah.
except deep, dark wilderness.
Yeah. My
Good times.
my first kind of being humbled by nature experience in my life was so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I was always just very much flat flat area, no real like impressive nature. And then like when I was 12, I was in Alaska for a couple of weeks, and there was something about just being in Alaska um that I realized, oh, like this is different than I thought. This is like something to be feared. It's something to be respected. There was something about just being in that, like in that kind of like vastness of nature that humbles you, or it should. Hopefully, it would, if you are, relatively connected to anything. But yeah, that was like the first time I was like, oh, nature is yeah, that indifference to our cooperation, I think is
Hmm.
that's when I first felt it. So then I've been to Alaska a few times, and every time it's like I realize that um, I'm I'm not safe, and I
Yeah.
need to be careful. So anyway, um, but anyway, so we've gone 30 minutes
Let's
talking,
talk about
and
Dopefoot.
we haven't even talked about, yeah, like the Bigfoot element of it. So the very first part of the book introduces a character that, so the character's name
Rustin
is
Parks.
Rustin Parks, who goes on to like who runs a Bigfoot museum.
Hmm.
And um and so like the very first thing we encounter is the idea of the existence of Bigfoot. So you said you don't believe in Bigfoot. um I'm kind of the same mind, but the way that you use the idea of Bigfoot and kind of that connection to almost like an atavistic natural kind of counter element to human progression. Um, where did that idea come from? Was it kind of because it was worked into one of those documentaries, or is it just an idea that's so ingrained into that area that it made sense to do it, or why was the Bigfoot element a big part of that?
Well, I really love Bigfoot. I'm a California native, and Bigfoot is our, state cryptid. Oregon and Washington would probably say the same thing. And he's like the biggest one in all of America, probably all of the world. I've been camping as a kid. I went camping in some of this Bigfoot country, and it's just insane. It's just so big, and in preparing for Dopefoot, I actually did drive a lot of this area so I could feel the roads, and so I would know, what it felt like, and so I could give it a that kind of authenticity. But no, Bigfoot, let me keep it on Bigfoot. Bigfoot is just so ingrained in popular culture that even if you don't believe in Bigfoot, you probably have some sort of feeling about Bigfoot, if that makes any sense. One of the things you didn't mention in when you were describing the kind of like the prologue, it's 1989. So this is, back when Bigfoot belief was comparatively recent. And back then, we'd all seen the Patterson Gimlin film, the famous one where the Bigfoot turns and got the profile. I mean, as a kid growing up, that was presented to me as something that was real. It was presented as, look at this amazing proof, you know. So I grew up kind of like in the back of my mind being like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's real because grown-ups told me so, and they showed me this on television. You know, in 1989, you know, cameras were rare. You know, it was still very much fringe. You know, cryptozoology and Bigfoot is a fringe, but it's also a million dollar, multi-million dollar industry. Back then, there was still so much more unknown. There were legitimate reasons to put your efforts into this kind of endeavor. Seems like by now, you know, with so many people looking and so everyone with a camera and still nothing, it becomes harder to believe as you grow older. And that character, we, we see him, you know, in Harmless's world through a recollection that Harmless has, and he's grown up and he's kind of like lost his faith. He still owns the Bigfoot Museum, but he basically feels he wonders if his whole life has been wasted just trying to find this Bigfoot. Anyway, that's the prologue. I love Bigfoot. Bigfoot is like this awesome free IP that anyone can, you know, use for a book or a movie, and people have. You know, there's Bigfoot romance out there. I just love it. You know, so I knew there was going to be a built-in audience for Bigfoot. I had just relocated to Northern California, and you know, up here, nature kind of closes in a way that it doesn't down in Southern California in the city. So it was just everything came together in that moment, and you know, I wrote the first draft over a course of maybe like 10, 12 weeks, and just knew I had something.
That's awesome. See, and I'm the type of disbeliever where I'm like, in my mind, I've got arguments against something like Bigfoot, um, but my girlfriend likes to say, "Don't yuck someone's yum," and
Yeah.
so I don't kind of shit on people thinking about whether Bigfoot exists or not. But like the one thing I will say is like in a story like this, it is easy to live in that what if, you
Hmm.
know, like to just open your mind up to if this was a real thing and it was part of this story, like holy shit, imagine that. Like that there's almost like a it's just like a better experience to not nitpick like, oh, I don't think it's real. I don't think it's real. Don't care. In this story, it's like a fantastic element to the story. So
Hmm.
that's kind of where I have to like temper my naysaying and just kind of like experience the fun of the story or the significance of the story, I guess I would say.
Well, I guess, you know, it was something that was important to me is I didn't want people who believe in Bigfoot to feel condescended, you know, or to feel dismissed, and I didn't want people who don't believe in Bigfoot to feel like they're being forced to suspend their disbelief in order to enjoy this book. I
Mhm.
wanted you to be able to have a fantastic cryptid adventure no matter where you fell on the spectrum, because ultimately, as you know, it's not about whether or not Bigfoot's real, it's about belief and,
Yeah.
you know, the names that we give to things and each other. And
Well, that brings me to kind of a general feeling I think about um, the nature side of this story. So we've talked about the human side and everything, and Bigfoot being an avatar, kind of the side of nature in this. But like, I think it would have been easy for you to, and like, if this is too much of a spoiler, we can. But like, it would have been easy for you to just focus on the idea of Bigfoot as an avatar for and representative of the natural side of things.
mhm,
But you kind of built this kind of mini I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Like it there's not just like the cryptid element of it or the natural things we don't like things that now I'm stumbling over how to say this without saying the thing I want to say. Nature's represented by multiple things, not
mhm,
just the idea of Bigfoot,
mhm,
and that created kind of a complexity and layers to the pushback from nature that I thought was really cool. Like, um, like there's a sophistication to maybe nature, but also like the history of the region, I guess,
Hmm.
that um, is in contrast to the kind of come latelys, the Lithuanians and like the
Hmm.
other people who are just trying to like exploit it. Nature has got this kind of like other culture to it. Culture? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like has a depth to it that is represented in an interesting way too. Like as we get farther into the story, what came before and how is that represented in the story? It's hard to talk about when you can't spoil things.
We could tiptoe around things. I like teasing.
But so I guess that I thought was cool. There's and we didn't even mention like you there's these all these cool elements of history that you thread throughout. So like I've vague booked that thing, but like even you're in a place where you live, where you work, you're sitting around with your coworkers, of course you're going to talk, you're going to tell stories. And so there's like literal campfire stories about like a clown, like a killer clown
Yeah.
is part of this story. Then you're like,
Yeah.
where the hell did this come from? But like that kind of campfire story, like you just kind of thread history throughout this too in a way where it's like there's so much. It's not even like a super long book, but you layer stuff in um, very like efficiently, I guess, because you said efficiency before, but like layering in those other elements of history and giving depth to things is kind of all over this place.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to, find a way to do it in a way that felt natural. And the campfire motif, pops up so many times until it becomes literal. Even from the very beginning, we're hearing stories from the driver while he's smoking cigarettes and smoking meth. Constantly like with the lighter, so there's fire. Same
Yep.
thing when he gets to the farm and he finds out that inhaled drugs besides cannabis are kind of like part of the culture up there as well during grow season and harvest season. Again, more stories kind of around the lighter and the
Yep.
pipe, or when he first meets Mother Agatha and they sit down with the bong. There's another campfire there, and it gets to the point where you got the literal campfire, and then even after that, when Honeydew and Harmless are up in the platform and they're looking down at the damage, it's like what they're looking at is almost like a campfire. So,
Yep.
and then at the end, they're Harmless and Old Man are sitting around at the campfire. So, and then anyway, there are lots of campfires,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's how we
And
communicate. That's how that's how stories are told. And in each one of these ways, it was just such a perfect moment to let the characters reveal the history through their stories.
mhm. And I guess it suits an idea of oral tradition as probably like what they have in a situation where technology is really kind of not present at all.
Hmm.
Like you are off the grid, you're removed from modern society in a way.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, you have the oral tradition kind of rises back up because what else is there? Like, I'm sure there's books and stuff, but like for a community to happen, this is what we have. Yeah.
Yeah, I was worried that it was too monologue-y. I know that's not a word, but one of my biggest concerns was that it was too monologue-y. No one seems to be complaining about that. And then, once you hit the halfway mark, it's nonstop. It's like
Yeah.
no one's talking anymore, so I mean they do occasionally, but I was reading, they say don't read your bad reviews, but there was one did not finish. And the reviewer's like, yeah, it stopped at 40%. If there's any horror, it was taking too long to show up, so I quit. And it's like, oh man, you were almost there. You were almost there.
Yeah. I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like it was your pace and again like the way that you um, didn't make it feel like you were just beating me over the head with like the important facts and stuff made it that it was like a well paced, easy read. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, thank you. I wanted it to be not simple, but yeah, something that you could consume. That's something you could jump right into.
Mhm. Yeah. Like again, there's this is a testament to the fact that you kind of like weave things in so subtly that it again we're 45 minutes into talking and we haven't talked about kind of what is presented as a defense mechanism for the farm that Harmless joins
Hmm.
is that they act like a cult.
Hmm.
So there's a cult element to it. They sacrifice animals. They dress culty, um, and ostensibly that is to make the farm seem scary, so people stay away. Like that's
Hmm.
the kind of stated reason for that. But if I were Harmless coming into a situation where um, I suddenly feel like I'm way out of my depth, and now I'm like working on this farm where they're sacrificing animals and stuff, and the truth doesn't feel very like solid groundy. I'd be like, wait, am I secretly in a cult? Am I gonna like when it's too late figure out that I'm in a cult? So that was an interesting element too, where I have to imagine I assumed that you put that in because like that's a real kind of element of protection of these farms and stuff, but where'd the cult idea come from?
I mean, every horror story is better with a cult, right? I, I just thought, just that it would be so crazy if the cannabis farm was run by a satanic cult, and I kind of ran with it. Part of it was thinking about in the documentary I don't like the one on Hulu. They kind of proposed the idea that cannabis growers encouraged belief in Bigfoot, kind of to scare people away from their areas. I liked the idea that these growers on this mountain would be leaning into this cult element for the same reason, just to try to scare people. Like, this is a bad area. This is a satanic area. You don't want to come here whatsoever. So, yeah, it is just their cover. But then, I wanted it to be almost like to the point where you just can't tell. I mean, they deny it so much. It's like, why are you denying it so much?
That's
And it's like, there are so many things about them that definitely check off the list of cult, but they keep swearing they're not a cult. And it's like, so dismissive of, why do you keep bringing up cult? We're not,
they're protesting too much.
they're protesting a bit too much, and then it's kind of like, at what point, can you even say one from the other, because they do act cultishly,
Well,
whether or
yeah.
not they worship Satan intentionally.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like they separate you from your name. You are separated from trusted people in your life, so you don't have connection to your family or friends or whatever. There are specific things you do, specific ways you act, the way that they dress. There's like rituals involved. There's like so many hallmarks of actual cults that like, yeah, like it makes you think, um, even if maybe it started out as like a goofy cover, did they start to take it seriously?
Right.
And then events that happen toward the end of the book kind of raise an eyebrow too. Like, wait a minute, like there's more to this story
Mhm.
um, than there was when I first heard about the reason they're saying this place acts like a cult. So yeah,
Mhm.
that was like a fun thing too. And without revealing the ending or anything, I do want to say that yeah, there's a part where it just gets wild and it
Mhm.
becomes the pace of it becomes nonstop,
Mhm.
and I don't want to say like in an action way, but like it ramps up and it is just kind of nonstop until we get to the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it definitely does have this kind of like grown-up Goonies feel, where they're
Oh,
like,
totally.
in the woods battling the bad guys from one side and the other bad guys from the other side, and then the other bad guys show up. I wanted it to kind of be kind of like fun like that, before I, pulled my big twist. I think that's why the reviewer who did not finish, she just wasn't patient enough, because once the twist hits, I think it hits harder that way. I think I set up the expectation that by that point, I've set up the expectation that this is an adult Goonies. This is a grown up Goonies cryptid forest adventure, where the stakes are a little higher. And then I'm like, no, no, it's not. It's not that at all. And that kind of like shift, um, where everything literally gets thrown out the window, kind of has unsettled a few people. Someone, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I kind of hated you for a second when you did that." It's like, that's, I kind of like to do that. I like to pull the rug out from under you, but it might not be the Bigfoot story you wanted, but hopefully it's the Bigfoot story you need. I wouldn't have done something that drastic if I didn't think I could land,
Yep.
stick the landing. So yeah, I didn't realize. I mean, I guess I realized it was going to be like a shocking moment, but I didn't realize some people were going to be like so upset when it turns out that this adventure you imagined yourself on is not a happy fuzzy activity. Action
Well,
becomes secondary and horror comes way to the front.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I now that you say that too, the thing I think is in a situation like that, those big reactions are trophies, whether it's a big good reaction or a big less than good reaction, like that you got someone to feel that kind of high of a feeling probably means that you're on the right track. Like that's how I feel about it. I know that not every story I read I'm going to fully connect with. And I can't remember who I was talking with. I was talking to Josh Mellerman, and we were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about enjoying stories and everything. And we both were talking about how like there's books and there's stories that like overall I was like that was okay, but these fucking scenes were awesome. And like
Yeah.
those scenes that were awesome elevate the whole experience. And so like um I'm not saying that's a situation with this, but like I think that when you have the ability to generate bigger reactions from people, that's probably like one of the best things you can do, even if not everybody's reacting positively. If everybody just
Mhm.
like reacted positively, that's almost boring too.
Yeah, it's not a happy ending book. It's a horror book. So transformation. The main character has an arc, and transformation is painful, and he has to run his gauntlet.
Yeah. So wrapping up the conversation about Dopefoot, um, I thought it was a great ride. I thought it was a great
Thank
ride,
you.
and I thought that like it kind of solidified for me that when I read you, and everybody who's listening, if that 40% woman is listening, um, there's a comfort in knowing that you're going to take me on a good adventure when I read something that you wrote, um, and it's because you're just a damn good writer. It's obvious that you understand how stories work and how to create plot and make character arcs
Thank you.
and to move a story along and to do it in a way that is entertaining and stuff. So I think that there's probably people out there who would write the same story and just it would feel goofy or flat or one dimensional. But like
Yeah.
you wrote a story that says a lot in this setting, and like I think about back to teleportasm, which is like, can you think of like a more on its face ridiculous concept,
Right.
and you took it to funny places, you took it to some of the most like existentially bleak places I've ever
Hmm.
read. Like you took that concept and you really and I think it reminds me of how like some of the best comedy is when someone's in an absurd situation but they
Yeah.
take it seriously.
Yeah.
like kind of like you were saying before, like that seriousness that you take this story kind of honors the idea better than it would if you were just kind of like, oh, blah blah blah. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, Teleportasm is a horror comedy. I definitely, it's not grounded in real reality, so to speak. It's sci-fi. There's nothing straight up supernatural, but it's very fringe sci-fi, and it's funny. I wanted to imagine scenes that were very funny and very gross, and again, I go for kind of like big twists. I think, in Teleportasm, in addition to the end, there's that Welcome to Dead World chapter where you're like, wait a minute, I was laughing for
Yeah.
like 9 chapters, and then you're going to put me through this bullshit. But that everyone says that's their favorite. That's the chapter, the besides the ending, which, might be controversial. Everyone talks about the Dead World chapter when we really
Yeah.
dive into it, because it's such a departure. But anyway, Dopefoot's different because Dopefoot is a drama almost.
Hmm.
It's funny, but it's not a comedy.
Right.
It's funny,
Yep.
hopefully, in the way that real life is funny. And yes, there are some wild elements that I throw in there. There's a drone with chainsaws flying around trying to cut people up. I get silly from time to time, but you know, I imagine some big scenes, but most of the scenes are smaller set pieces, and like we were talking about earlier, it's less about what's happening and more about the characters' reactions to what's happening and how connected you feel to those
Mhm.
characters.
Totally. And then I don't know how I didn't mention this before, but the idea that you almost immediately name the main character Harmless at the very beginning of the book makes you think immediately, is this person harmless? Is the
Hmm.
story going to turn out in a way where they actually are harmless, or is that a bad take on this person? So like
Hmm.
you plant the seed right away, like how harmless is this person? I like the fact that like that's the name for this character because like
Hmm.
from a storytelling perspective, that it's not a promise, but it's like it poses a question, and like
Hmm.
the story will tell you what the answer to that question is.
Right, right. Harmless question mark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
So
yeah, I
really
mean,
cool.
you say harmless enough, you just believe everything about it. I don't care if this is a little spoiler, but old man is this very perceptive young man. He really can see to the heart of just about every situation, and he's kind of mystified. He doesn't see through harmless. Harmless is so legitimately naive that even old man can't penetrate into what's going on deeper down.
Yeah.
Even old man is kind of diverted.
Yeah.
Again, we don't want to say too much.
Yeah. um, so outside of Dopefoot, what else do you have going on? Is there like projects that you're working on, things
Yeah.
that are coming up in the future?
Yeah, I have 3 manuscripts holstered, in various states of, ready to go. And I'd love to find an agent to go to bat for me. I'd love to hook up with a small press who would be excited to work with me. I just I want to keep writing, and I have a great idea. I mentioned I was at Bizarro Con last weekend. It's like a literary convention. It's also kind of like a writing workshop, and I actually kind of like got to workshop this idea that I would love to dive into. So a lot. I would love to just write full time and just be nothing but a writer. If you're in the industry, give me a call. Let's set up a Zoom meeting, and let me tell you what I have to offer.
That's awesome. Bizarro Con are so. My thoughts on Bizarro as a genre are kind of frozen in like the mid 2010s, um, with like the when I think about Bizarro, I think about Like obviously Carlton Mellick. I think about Eraserhead Press. I think about
Hmm.
why am I blanking? Bradley Sands. I don't know if you know Bradley Sands.
I think I met them all at Bizarro Con, so
Yeah. Um,
they
but
really named it and defined the movement.
yeah,
And
Jeremy
now
Robert
they are the
Johnson.
movement.
Yeah, yeah. Jeremy Robert Johnson was on a panel I ran
Hmm.
recently. But like, so I think I'm the thing that I've noticed is that Bizarro. It feels like the presence was big in the mid 2010s, and it feels like it's almost kind of compressed a little bit.
Hmm.
Is that your feeling, or is it just something that I've lost touch of, and it's still like this thriving scene?
It was really my first introduction to the scene. I'm coming into it so late. My first book came out for less than 5 years ago, so I'm a relatively new writer. I was in journalism for a while,
Yeah,
entertainment journalism, horror journalism. So I was into films and conventions and festivals and things like that. So I haven't really been paying attention long enough, but I did kind of get the crash course. And, it is a very tight, strong, vibrant community. I can't speak to it in terms of what preceded, but it seems like it still has a lot of energy. There's a lot of energy in those groups. And, I definitely want to go again next year. Bizarro is so bizarre, and obviously I'm more of a straight up horror author, but there I definitely have bizarro elements popping up from time to time, like giant insects here and there or whatever. But it's a place where people look beyond the action or the aesthetic and really delve into, like, okay, what is this author really saying? Like,
yeah.
why is this a guy's wife turning into a tapeworm? What does that really mean? But yeah, I loved Bizarro Con. I think Bizarro is still a hot subgenre. I think Eraserhead Press is has a wonderful history and a wonderful future.
I saw in your kind of social media post too that I think I saw Bitter Corella was there.
Yeah.
Who like I only, and then this is me just like I I'm going to say me being naive, but like my impression of Bitter Corella is primarily from the Midnight Pals kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
like thing on social media. But I know that um, was it Moon Glow
Yeah, Moonflow.
Moonflow?
Yeah,
It was close.
they're nominated for a Stoker,
Yeah,
best first
first
novel.
novel, right?
So
Yeah.
yeah, are you going to be at Stoker, or you're just a virtual presence?
No, yeah, I can't make it to StokerCon in person, and so like my best effort was I'm going to help program the virtual panels, so I won't
Bitter
be there.
is having a
Yeah,
moment right now. Like,
yeah,
it was her first Bizarro Con as well. So it's kind of like I don't want to say a closed scene, but there's like a core group. And
yeah.
Bitter and I were coming in as outsiders, but they were very accepting of us. And Bitter was really, she got so much attention. She was nominated for an award. She's going to be published by a press that is related to Eraserhead. And she was, she did a reading. So she was great, and everyone loved her. But yeah, she's going out for the Stoker first weekend in June there. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Moonflow is compulsively readable. Have you read it?
I have not.
It
No.
is batshit. It is like, Dopefoot is kind of like rated G compared to what Moonflow. Okay, it's PG, and Moonflow is like a hard NC-17. But it also takes place in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. So that's kind of like the connection we made, was through our work initially, and we also met through another forest horror author, Allison Mick, who just came out with Humboldt Cut
Oh, right.
in
Hmm.
February. So the three of us, Allison and I met through my wife, who used to know Allison, who does know Allison, obviously.
Hmm.
So I met Allison, and Allison introduced me to Bitter. we read each other's works. We saw these overlapping themes, even though they're really different perspectives. Humboldt Cut is really lush and gothic, and Moonflow is batshit crazy in the best possible way. And Dopefoot's almost kind of like a mainstream in between the two of them. Just this little Bigfoot fellow walking around the woods. No, it's not that. But yeah, Bitter is awesome. Allison's going to be at Stoker Con as well. I don't know when this is going to air. It might be over by the time it airs, but I'm really keeping my fingers crossed. I think once I'm just really hoping that Bitter becomes a Stoker winner,
Yeah,
because
that'd be great.
they're just really having a moment right now, and I just want to see all the doors swing wide open for her.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that too. I think that one of the things about what's happening with horror recently or currently is that um, it's not the same old people. It feels like there's newer waves that are getting attention and getting praise for their work, and that makes me so happy. I've been podcasting about books since 2011, so
Wow.
I'm like 15 years in the game of
Yeah,
talking
you're
about books.
deep.
So like I have like a long history. So like I was talking to Chris Panettiere the other day about some of his stuff, and I was saying like to me, some of the success I'm seeing right now with the authors who are really feeling momentum feels like a second wave in my perspective, because I was there with Paul Tremblay and Steve Graham Jones and everybody when they were unknown, and saw those guys rise up, and then seeing now other people like rise up, like the newer stars. It makes me feel like excited about everybody. Like it's not like there's a pie that everybody's getting a slice of. It's
Right.
like everybody's welcome. Let's just keep doing this. And
Well,
I
it's
love.
you're really doing a public service to emerging authors like me. A lot of these podcasts and bookstagrams or books, they seem to concentrate on the same couple dozen books, couple dozen authors. It can seem hard to get the attention, people to take it seriously. But you do such a good job doing a deep dive, and your audience respects you so much that I just really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to promote my gory little cryptid mystery.
But you keep writing excellent stories, and I'll keep talking to you about them.
Deal.
But yeah, like that is the thing you mentioned has been real bothering me lately. Is like I'm at the point where like there's people that I just kind of don't want to talk to because I know that I will be one of 8 conversations with that person.
Yeah.
And it's just no, it takes the fun out of it. Like, why don't I have a conversation no one else is having, and give these different voices, give more diversity to the situation. And I hope that everybody who is podcasting or these things um, kind of embraces that idea too. Like there are so many voices.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just all popping, popping, popping. Bitter has a book coming out in October, so I should hook you guys up so that
Oh
she can
yeah.
get you an arc. It's called Quaint Folk. It takes place in Britain and folklore. I don't even know a lot about it beyond that. But like I said, Bitter's having a moment right now. She definitely qualifies because she's got this upcoming release and she can get you the arc.
Yeah,
And
totally.
you think I'm fun to talk to? Oh my goodness! Like Bitter is, yeah. And we were both currently living in the same area of Northern California, so we were able to carpool up to
Oh,
Bizarro Con.
cool.
It's great to have like a road dog when you're a writer on the road, on those lonely stretches. So
Yeah,
I
totally.
just
Yeah.
can't say enough good stuff about Bitter Corella, and everyone should read Moonflow and put Quaint Folk on their TBR
Well, yeah, we'll have to make that happen now for sure.
for sure.
Um, all right. Well, such an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
Always great to talk to you, and always great to read the stuff that you're putting out. So down the road, the next time you've got something to promote, yeah, let's do the next talk.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, that was a fantastic conversation with Joshua Millican, and I'm really happy that I got to have him back on the podcast and talk about his Bananas book, Dopefoot. And that book comes out on June 16th, so there's still a little bit of time before it releases. Get your pre-orders in, or make sure you buy it on release day, release week. Support this book. It's a really fun, crazy romp. And as you heard in the interview, Josh has such a talent for taking kind of out there ideas and treating them very seriously and writing really good stories around them. So be sure to check that out. You can always help me out by supporting me on social media. Follow me on Instagram, Blue Sky. I think I'm on Threads as well. If you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a review, give it a rating, leave comments, subscribe to my Substack. That's my website, thearcparty.com. And you can always follow in the link in my bio for social media has access to my bookshop.org affiliate page. So if you buy anything through my affiliate links, a little money goes back to me. So those are all a bunch of different ways that you can support me and the podcast. That's going to wrap it up for this one. And until we talk again, remember, always carry a book.